Tonight, 200 days since Hamas terrorists targeted Israel. The latest as the IDF fights against the group in Gaza. Plus,
our global interests come with global responsibilities.
The Senate gets to work on passing foreign aid for Israel and Ukraine. And
looking at what I believe is going to be the future of the United Methodist Church, I didn't really see a place for me.
One of the nation's largest Protestant denominations kicks off its annual conference with big questions about LGBTQ rights. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
College campuses reach a boiling point, erupting in anger over the Israel-Hamas war. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And I'm Tara Mergener from the CBN studio in Washington. Protests, arrests, and canceled classes. That is the scene on university campus across the nation.
Administrators say the scale of unrest is unlike anything they've seen since the start of the war 200 days ago. Students outraged by the humanitarian disaster in Gaza are calling on their schools to divest from Israel. Police arrested 150 people at New York University last night when a pro-Palestine rally spiraled into chaos. Similar scenes are unfolding across the country at Yale, UC Berkeley, MIT, and others. Columbia University officially is moving classes online. Jewish students say criticism of Israel has veered into open anti-Semitism, adding that they no longer feel safe on campus.
It's been happening in one place after the other, at different degrees, and if it's not addressed properly and efficiently, it will continue to grow. If they're doing things which break the law, they should have consequences as defined by the law. But they must have consequences. The answer can't be, we spoke to them.
In Israel today, the IDF intensified strikes across Gaza in some of the heaviest shelling in weeks. It came after terrorists fired rockets into Israeli communities, which Israel claims were all intercepted.
Meanwhile, allies taking action to blunt Iran's attack on Israel could lead to a new phase in Middle East geopolitics. The key involves several Arab nations coming to Israel's defense.
That's right. Experts say the informal coalition results from years of work breaking down regional barriers. CBN national security correspondent Caitlin Burke joins us now with a look at what it could mean for the rest of the Middle East moving forward. Caitlin.
Tara, John, for decades, efforts to create peace between Arab countries and Israel made very little progress until 2020, when the Trump administration brokered the Abraham Accords. That agreement helped normalize diplomatic relations, first between Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain, then eventually with Sudan and Morocco.
That is one of the most gratifying things that has happened during the Biden administration, is how the Abraham Accords have endured.
Victoria Coates, a former deputy national security advisor to President Trump, played an initial role in negotiations for the agreement. She says it passed a true test when Arab nations joined the West in responding to Iran's attack, marking a seismic shift in the region.
The action out of Iran was unprecedented. To just attack Israel directly, and so was the Arab response. But I think most notably in there is Saudi Arabia, and the Saudis came out and publicly confirmed that they had shot down an Iranian projectile that entered their airspace.
Iraq, Jordan, the UAE, and Egypt all joined Saudi Arabia in providing critical intelligence, support, and cooperation.
They realized that if you're going to be in what increasingly is a regional struggle with Iran, you could not have a better friend than Israel. And, that was the kind of realization that set in over the course of 2019 that led to the Abraham Accords, and that I think we saw on full display last weekend.
Coates says there's tremendous potential for the alliance to strengthen, especially if Saudi Arabia enters a formal agreement with Israel.
There was talk earlier this year of potentially getting to a Saudi deal that was derailed, I think perhaps not coincidentally, by October 7th. But that deal is still possible in the future because it's highly unlikely UAE and Bahrain would have entered into those kinds of deals with Israel without Saudi support.
She believes the largest barrier is U.S. insistence that Israel comes to a deal with the Palestinians as a prerequisite.
That's not a Saudi point at this point. That's the Biden administration insisting on that. And that's kind of a poison pill now after October 7th, because there's no way Israel's going to reward the Palestinians for what happened. with any kind of a state.
Measured response by Israel to Iran's attack, many experts believe the Jewish state took another step in strengthening ties with its Arab neighbors. John, Tara?
National security correspondent Caitlin Burke. Thank you so much, Caitlin. Well, by this time tomorrow, the president likely will have signed $95 billion in foreign funding for America's allies.
That's right. The aid package is now in the Senate's hands, where lawmakers are set to green light the legislation after it passed in the House over the weekend. It includes $60 billion for Ukraine, $26 billion for Israel, and $8 billion for Taiwan and other Indo-Pacific allies. Also in that package, a ban on TikTok in the U.S. if the app's Chinese parent company doesn't sell its shares within 1 year.
Let us not delay this. Let us not prolong this. Let us not keep our friends around the world waiting.
These are not normal times here in the
House Speaker Mike Johnson's job is still on the line, with some Republicans calling for his removal after he got the bipartisan support needed to pass the bill. Now, while some Senate Republicans are also critical of Ukraine aid, the chamber is expected to approve the package.
Well, CBN chief political analyst David Brody joins us now. David, always great to see you. So barring any unforeseen disruptions, this bill will pass the Senate, and President Biden has said that he will sign it. It should be noted, though, President Trump softened his tone last week after years of being sour on Ukraine. David, how did this bill make it through without President Trump tanking it like he did the bipartisan border deal?
Well, because he just didn't speak out about it all that much. And here's the reason. He understands that Mike Johnson in the House has a majority of one. That's what he actually said. Those are his words, that Republicans have a majority of one. And look, Trump is always about the art of the deal. He understands, first of all, not good politics for Republicans to gum up the works yet again and go through a big speaker fight. But beyond all of that, if you don't have the votes, as they like to say, you don't have the votes, and that's it. And so Trump understood that, so he backed away because he knew it was a political loser. He's kind of done that on abortion as well. That's kind of his MO of how he operates and the way he sees it. So because he backed away, that's why this thing got through, and it's going to be signed by the president.
David, we've got some reporting by The Hill that's highlighting the rupture among Republicans. So pitting first-term Ohio Senator J.D. Vance against Mitch McConnell's worldview of American power. Talk a little about that and what happens if the party cannot resolve their differences by November.
Well, Tara, they're not going to resolve those differences by November. There's no doubt about that. This is the big schism. Look, the Ukraine funding, guys, is a proxy fight for what's really going on within the Republican Party right now, why you see all the skirmishes. It's this America First populist mentality versus more of that kind of Nikki Haley, Mike Pence, Ronald Reagan back in the day. What's the word I'm looking for? But there's a word for it. I can't come up with it now. But that way of governing, if you will. And look, they've tried nation building before. We did this with George W. Bush back in the day after 9/11. It did not work. We know it didn't work. And so the America First populist crowd is on the move. And let's be clear, they're winning. They might have lost this battle, but they're winning because they've got a lot more numbers than they used to have. And they've got a former president who could be president in just a few short months.
David, does the threat of insurrection still exist for House Speaker Mike Johnson on the House side? Is his job still on the line, or have calls for his ouster seemed to be tamped down after President Trump gave him a little bit of endorsement there?
I think the Trump endorsement was important, but I also think there's the fact that Democrats are going to save him. I mean, look, Democrats are getting everything they want. So, I mean, it's in the Democrats' best interest right now to have Mike Johnson as Speaker of the House. So Marjorie Taylor Greene can bring a couple of cohorts with her, Tom Massey, and I think Paul Gosar is the other one now. They're up to 3. Good luck to you, MTG, because what's going to end up happening is that the Republicans, most of the Republicans will vote for Speaker Johnson, and he'll only just need a few Democrats to save his job, and he'll get plenty of Democrat help. His job is safe.
All right, we're going to have to leave it right there. David Brody, Chief Political Analyst for CBN News. Thanks so much for joining us, David.
You bet. Thanks, guys.
The United Methodist Church kicks off its annual meeting today. Now it plans to tackle major questions about its stance on LGBTQ rights. Welcome back. The city of Baltimore is suing the owner of the ship that slammed into the Francis Scott Key Bridge last month, causing its collapse. In a new court filing, the city's attorneys accuse the owner of the Dolly of negligence by ignoring known power issues before the collision. The company wants to cap its liability at $43 million, but the city argues against that, noting that the collision killed 6 people and shut down Baltimore's busy port. A federal court ultimately will decide liability for the bridge collapse.
The United Methodist Church is kicking off its annual conference today, and it's happening as the denomination faces a rapidly shrinking number of congregations. In the last 5 years, about a quarter of churches have left the UMC. One of the biggest issues, LGBTQ rights. More progressive UMC congregations are pushing for greater inclusion, causing others to leave or what the denomination calls disaffiliate.
It was clear that the conflict in the United Methodist Church was not going to be resolved. That impacted the message of the church, the witness of the church. That witness became very confused.
During this week's UMC conference, discussions over same-sex weddings and allowing gay clergy are set to take place. Liam Adams, religion reporter for The Tennessean, joins us now. Liam, you have written extensively about this issue, and there have been at least 7 previous splits in the Methodist Church of a similar scale, but many are calling the shifting stance on LGBTQ rights in the U.S. uncharted territory. Why is that?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, so what's unprecedented about this splintering in the UMC is kind of the high wire act between the shifting stance on LGBTQ rights in the US church versus the sort of cultural and legal conservatism among United Methodists outside the US. And so the big decisions that is facing the UMC General Conference is not only its policies around restrictions related to LGBTQ rights, but also the sort of regional structure of United Methodists in other countries. And so both of those decisions and legislation will sort of depend on each other.
So you talk about the High Wire Act and regionalization. Do you believe, based on your reporting, that the General Conference will lift LGBTQ-related bans this year?
So this year is the likeliest chance that those restrictions will be removed, largely due to an exodus of traditionalist churches, many of them joining a new breakaway denomination called the Global Methodist Church. When I talk to more conservative Methodists, they think that these restrictions will be removed because there aren't enough conservative delegates to sort of oppose it. When I talk to progressive leaders in the United Methodist Church, they are careful to sort of explicitly predict a certain electoral outcome, but are optimistic about the results at the end of next week.
What do you know about how congregations are preparing, and what other key issues do you think are on the table this year?
Yeah, so what we've seen in the lead up to the General Conference is a coalition of centrist and progressive United Methodist groups and leaders come together to voice support for both removing the anti-LGBTQ restrictions as well as this proposal called regionalization, which would give United Methodist regional authorities in other countries more autonomy, and that would likely allow the U.S. Methodist UMC Church to move in a more LGBTQ affirming stance, while United Methodist regional leaders in other countries, such as in African countries and in the Philippines, to maintain more traditionalist policies. And so you are seeing a support for both from centrist and progressive leaders for both removing these restrictions as well as for regionalization. You also have on the other side sort of traditionalist advocacy groups that have long sort of advocated for passing and maintaining some of those restrictions. This year, they're going to be focusing their attention a little more on this debate over the regional structure.
All right.
And
Liam, we are out of time, and we're going to have to leave it there. Liam Adams, religion reporter with the Tennessean, thank you so much for your time and your insights tonight.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, turning now to the controversy involving National Public Radio. Accusations of bias at the outlet has led some Republicans in Congress to introduce a bill to defund it. CBN's Dale Hurd has the story.
NPR has been on the hot seat ever since senior business editor Yuri Berliner wrote this article for the Free Press website, in which he accused the outlet of not only being biased, but completely devoid of any Republicans on the editorial staff.
I got so frustrated with what I saw was the lack of different perspectives in our coverage that I decided to look at voter registration among our staff.
Berliner found 87 registered Democrats and 0 Republicans. NPR suspended Berliner for writing the article in violation of company policy. He then resigned. The NPR controversy has led to fresh debate over whether the government should be funding news coverage at all, let alone one-sided news coverage. NPR has so far been unrepentant, with staffers telling the Washington Post they're being targeted by conservative activists. USA Today columnist Ingrid Jacques wrote that NPR should be defunded.
NPR is showing absolutely no inclination to change, and seems to be brushing off these very alarming allegations.
In a statement, National Public Radio CEO Catherine Marr said she and NPR remain committed to public service, editorial independence, and the mission to serve all of the American public. NPR is independent, beholden to no party, and without commercial interest. But Marr's social media history before becoming head of NPR shows a sharp partisan bent, once calling Donald Trump a deranged, racist psychopath. That NPR is liberal is not surprising.
Journalism as a whole has shifted in a more left-leaning or especially a more democratic perspective, right? There's something like 3.4% of all journalists today report being Republicans.
Some House Republicans have put forward a bill to defund NPR, and it's not being given much hope of passage.
But the issue is really, should we have a state-funded media at all? Right. I mean, the distinction between MSNBC's view and NPR is really non-existent. I mean, they're both basically coming from the same place, but only one's getting a subsidy.
A 2023 Gallup poll found less than a third of Americans trust the media, down from almost 3/4 in 1976. 58% of Democrats still trust the media, but only 11% of Republicans. NPR has made itself a bigger target because it's made such a big deal about its commitment to diversity, which in at least one respect, it clearly lacks. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Up next, caring for creation, how Christians are stepping up to save a bird species from extinction.
Welcome back. While Earth Day causes many to examine humanity's impact on the environment, it's also a chance for Christians to remember their mandate to be good stewards of God's creation.
And that includes some Christian conservationists concerned that nearly half of the world's migratory birds are vanishing and could soon face extinction. Brody Carter has that story.
The Bible has so much to say about how important God's creation is to God. And if we're going to love God and follow him, we need to love the things that he loves.
Christian conservationist Dr. Bob Sluka has been raising a red flag regarding nature for years. The recent UN State of the World's Migratory Species Report backed up that alarm, finding roughly 44% of them worldwide are declining in population.
And so things like corals are in decline, amphibians, frogs and toads. I mean, just even think about all the insects. There's been talk about the insect apocalypse, that just the crash in numbers of insects.
Dr. Sluka points to the Red List put out by the respected International Union for Conservation of Nature, which estimates more than 44,000 of the Earth's species are at risk of disappearing.
I think most scientists would agree already that we're in the 6th major extinction event.
Against the backdrop of this grim news, some migratory animals act as a beacon of hope.
So exciting. a humpback whale reaching the surface. So exciting and an amazing testament of what can happen when we take care of the earth and everything in it. These migratory animals have been able to rebound population prior to the era of commercial whaling.
Efforts saving whales and other threatened animals include the Marine Mammal Conservation Act, Clean Water Act, and Endangered Species Act.
Storm surgeons.
Beth Porterhouse with the Virginia Beach Aquarium and Marine Science Center believes effective conservation, though, begins with people, not policy.
Very simple things like, don't release balloons, reduce plastic consumption as much as possible, and look for opportunities in their everyday life to think of themselves as part of the whole community of life.
Despite their rebound, a surge in beached whales along the East Coast, juvenile humpbacks identified with entanglement scars. 4 whales died within a 1-week period. Experts are concerned, saying whales are a sign of the overall health of the ocean.
Every other breath basically comes from the ocean. The whales that support that ecosystem, they're kind of the farmers of the whole ocean by moving nutrients through the water column.
Porterhouse and Dr. Sluka agree that it's a somber reminder that our activities impact the land, the ocean, and our non-human neighbors that live there.
When's the last time you've heard a sermon on creation care in a church, or if ever? There's a challenge to those pastors out there, it's not political, it's biblical, and you gotta preach it.
Reporting in Virginia Beach, Virginia, Brody Carter, CBN News.
Finally tonight, how about riding to school in style?
I'll give it a try.
Yeah?
Well, a PE teacher in Oregon found a unique way to encourage students to exercise outside of the gym. It's called Bike Bus. In a series of TikTok videos capturing the ride to school, Coach Sam Balto often plays music during the ride, saying it's a great way to start the day.
It's an active way for children and families to get to school using their feet or on 2 wheels or however you can walk, roll.
Parents are also joining in on the 2-wheeled parade to Alameda Elementary. Balto has become a bit of an internet sensation through the creation of Bike Bus, and it does look like it's catching on. Look at those high fives and smiles on those faces.
And not one person is watching a cell phone.
Thanks for watching.
Good night.